All right, let's tackle part one. The source kicks things off with an argument from Rabbi Amnon Yitzhak. And his whole idea is that choosing a religious life, specifically a Haredi Jewish life, is a totally logical bet to make.
Okay, so here's how the bet is laid out. It's basically a simple cost-benefit analysis. Step 1, you choose a religious life. Step 2, if God exists, boom, you win the ultimate prize, eternal reward. But what if God doesn't exist? Well, according to this logic, you've lost nothing important, because life would be meaningless anyway. So you see, it's a bet with this potentially infinite upside and, from this point of view, basically zero downside.
Now, here's where it gets really interesting. The author of our source material, they're totally on board with this first bet. They buy the logic 100%. But, and this is a big but, they say that's just the starting line. Making that first choice, that first bet, it forces you into another, even tougher decision.
And that right there brings us to the real heart of the argument, this second internal bet. The moment you've decided to be religious, bam, you're immediately hit with another, way more complex decision to make.
So the source asks this really critical question. See, it's not about faith versus no faith anymore. The choice is now within faith itself. Which path do you actually follow? And honestly, this one question frames the entire rest of the argument.
Okay, so to really get a grip on this second bet, we've got to define the two options on the table. The source sets up this really fundamental choice right inside Rabbinic Judaism.
So here are the two paths. On one hand, you have traditional Rabbinic Judaism. This follows both the written Torah, the actual text, the first 5 books of the Bible, and the oral Torah, which is this huge collection of rabbinic laws and interpretations, like the Talmud. Then you've got the second option, a path that follows only the written Torah and basically rejects all those later interpretations.
So how do you weigh the risk of each choice? Well, the source comes up with this awesome thought experiment. I want you to imagine a debate, but it's not happening here on earth. It's in a heavenly court. And you have to stand up and defend the choices you made in your life directly to God.
All right, let's bring our 2 defendants to the stand. In this corner, we have someone who followed both the oral and the written Torah. And in the other corner, someone who followed only the written Torah. The question is, how is each one going to defend their actions?
And folks, this right here is the absolute heart of the wager. The person who followed both the oral and written Torah gets hit with a heavy accusation. You altered my law. And according to the source, they've got nothing to say, no defense. But the person who followed only the written Torah, when they're accused of ignoring the oral tradition, they have a solid defense, but it contradicted your written word. The source says this is a completely logical, completely defensible position.
Let's dig into that first case a little deeper. The source gives a great example, the law of an eye for an eye. The written Torah says it literally, but the oral Torah interprets it as, paying money instead. So in this heavenly court, the author argues that if you change God's explicit command, even if you mean well, you're left with absolutely no defense.
Okay, now let's flip over to the other defendant. Their defense is just pure, simple logic. Think about it. If you're presented with an oral Torah that seems to contradict the written Torah, isn't it reasonable to think, maybe this tradition didn't come from God? They just made a rational choice based on the evidence they had.
So, after setting up this whole cosmic courtroom drama, the author takes this risk analysis and uses it to lay out what they see as the one and only logical conclusion to this whole bet.
And here's the crucial takeaway. The author's idea of a safe bet isn't about being 100% sure you're right. No. It's about spiritual risk management. It's about choosing the path that minimizes your risk because you've got a logical, defensible reason for your actions, even if it turns out you were wrong.
And the source wraps it all up with this very direct suggestion, which really brings the whole argument full circle. After looking at all the risks, it lands on this one final piece of advice, essentially framing how you interpret Scripture as the biggest bet of all.
So let's just recap what we've seen here. It's a 2-part wager, right? It starts with the big choice, faith or no faith. But then it drills down into a super specific choice about how you actually interpret that faith. And the main takeaway, the safest path, isn't about being right. It's about having a defense if you're wrong.
And all of this leaves us with one last, kind of provocative question to think about. If faith really is a bet, what makes it a safe one? Is it about following a tradition that's been around for thousands of years? Is it about sticking to the literal word of a text no matter what? Or is it just about being able to stand by your choices with a logical defense?
whatever the outcome. It's a question that really gets you thinking about what it even means to believe.